So we're going to start off, so Marla is showing off these great t-shirts that a lot of us are wearing and we think are wonderful. They're the Burgers on Weekly shirts, y'all for everybody, so they're super great. I would need Dan is very excited. Okay, so we are kicking off this one with what I think is a really fun and energetic song. So this is one that is worth standing up for and singing along for. So please, everyone, rise. That would be awesome. I would be controlling this. The song called Move Along. A lot of people think it's a song about mowing lawns, and I promise it's not. And you'll catch on to it. So let's do it. Part of the band in a small way. So, welcome everyone to Sunday Assembly Atlanta. We are a secular community without a deep dogma or doctrine. we want to help everyone do three things, which are live better, help often, and wonder more. No, I didn't need to look at the notes for that, I know that. And all in this one life that we know we have. So I'm curious if there are any first timers in the audience. If you could raise your hand, that would be lovely. And I think they deserve I hope that you make a connection here, which is very apropos because the theme tonight is interconnection. We'll be exploring that term as it ranges in a lot of different meanings, from relationship between people, of course, but also communities, nations, and even ideas like about molecules connecting with covalent bonds and Lego bricks. So exploring lots of different meanings of the term. And yeah, I hope everyone can walk away thinking in a new way maybe about interconnection, and especially just having some new connection, tonight with someone you didn't know. So we're going to start off this assembly with something of a lost connection. I'm sad to say that SA lost one of its members last month to a sudden and fast-acting illness. And we're going to have, in lieu of a moment of mindfulness this time, we're going to have just a brief moment of reflection about Bob Glassley, who was a father, husband, a punk rocker, which is pretty awesome. And as it relates to SAA, he was the leader of the Science Circle from August of 2014 to April 2015. So these were like discussion groups that happened before assemblies. They took place at our old location and downstairs. Show of hands, like who went to one of those Science Circles, right? Yeah, like I was always really, really impressed with the way that he conducted a conversation and let people kind of bandy about with different ideas, all related to science. He always did his homework and shared all his resources and he really elevated the conversations that he brought to us. You also might not expect then that he was also the founder of an 80s LA punk band, and he was reviving it in our new political climate. And the band's name, by the way, is the Chiefs, which is the shirt I'm wearing right now. I got it at a celebration of life that happened a couple weeks ago. So I really just want to take maybe just 30 seconds of just reflecting upon the connections that we have. And if you had a connection with Bob, as he has been lovely, thankfully photographed, thanks to Lori and other folks through the years, conducting the Science Circle, helping out with the conference in 2015, or just really rocking out. I just want to take maybe 30 seconds of just reflecting upon the connection that we have, just being grateful for that in this month of being grateful and Thanksgiving and all that. So just take 30 seconds. Thank you for indulging me in that. The next thing we're going to have is a reading that I think you might relate, but I think Lisa's going to come up here and she brought this to us. So why don't we give a hand to Lisa as she gives us this reading.
So thinking about interconnection, I was thinking about roots as in common ancestors, roots as in Route 66, maybe a path we travel together, relationships, and also rituals. This is a book of poetry by Kim Dower, Last Train to the Missing Path. This poem is Time of Arrival. I called my mother last night to tell her my plane had landed. I'd be home for dinner, but she wasn't there. She was there, on the phone, but wasn't there. I kept saying, Mom, can you hear me? The plane has landed. I'll be home for dinner. But she said nothing. I could see her face, could see her holding the phone, an old-fashioned one, yellow cord and coil, her head tilted, her sunny smile. But her voice was barely discernible. I get it that she's dead, but we had a ritual. We always reported when my mother landed. My mother and I, we had a ritual.
Let's give some claps for. I always appreciate, Lisa, how you go out and you find something that means something to you that relates to the theme, and you bring it to us. I really appreciate that. So now we're going to shift gears a little bit, and we're going to consider a different form of interconnection. So we're going to zoom up past our rows of chairs, past this building, and look at the entire city, the city of Atlanta as a whole. I'm really excited to introduce Ryan Gravel. He's the designer of the Atlanta Beltline and someone who is always improving our collective conversation about how we connect and enrich our local communities and the pathways between them. So please, let's welcome up Ryan Gravel.
Thanks for having me tonight. I'm interested to hear about this group and happy to come talk with you this evening about interconnection in particular, because it's, as we've been sort of cooking on this topic for the last month, and I've been thinking about what I usually talk about in a different kind of way, which is always a lot of fun. And so it is an unusual kind of conversation for me to talk about my work in this way. So I hope you'll forgive me if I don't make any sense, or my slides are also kind of out of the typical order for my talk, so because I thought it would go along better with this. This is a picture of me when I was in college. I did a year abroad in Paris. It changed the way I saw cities and understood the world. My friend says I look like a French anarchist. But this is what I still see when I look in the mirror in the morning. Seriously. But within a month of being there, I lost 15 pounds. I was in the best shape of my life because I was eating fresh food and I was walking wherever I went. And the relationship, the interconnectedness between my built environment, the place that I was living, the physicality of that place, and my own health and well-being was real to me in a way I'd never been before. I was there studying architecture, but I fell in love with the city, became fascinated with the role of the city in shaping my life, that it matters, the kind of place that we live, to how we live our lives. And so I became particularly interested in Paris, of course, because it's Paris and it's beautiful. There's no better place really to be 22, figuring out who you are in the world. But I got fascinated with the role of infrastructure, in particular in shaping our lives. And the grand boulevards are not just about, they were built for military purposes to quell social uprising, also to provide support public health by cleaning up the dirty, narrow streets that were havens for cholera and other kinds of diseases. They also opened up the city in different ways, and they provided not just ways to move people around, but also conveyed water and sewer. They created public spaces and fountains, eventually street lighting and subways. And they created everything that you know about Paris today, its culture and its social life. The Impressionist painters were literally painting the light that was now streaming down into the city streets. That became fascinated with this idea that infrastructure is not just about infrastructure, all kinds of things in the way that we think about them, but it's the foundation for our economy. It's the foundation for our social life and for our culture. It matters, again, to how we live our lives. So I came back to Atlanta. That was the summer of 2005. I came back and was wondering how you would start to rethink Atlanta and make it into that kind of a place where, because this is similarly built by infrastructure, it similarly shapes our lives. It's just more of a limitation than it is, generative and creating the kind of lives that we want. By the time I finished graduate school at the end of the 90s, I was doing a joint degree with architecture and urban planning, and became fascinated with this loop of railroads, this circles of downtown and midtown Atlanta. I wanted to repurpose them to create a new way of life for people. Like literally, that's what the Beltline is all about. And I never imagined that we would actually build it. But I graduated, I went to work for an architecture firm. Many of you may have heard this whole story, I won't bore you to death with it. But basically, we created a grassroots movement of people who saw a vision and aspiration for their lives that was better than anything they saw for their car windshield. We were talking with neighborhood people through the neighborhood associations, through NPUs. We were here in Cameron Park many times and all over the city. We were led by Kathy Willard, who you may have elected or voted for, not voted for last week, unfortunately, in the mayoral election. But she was at the time on City Council, chair of the Transportation Committee, and soon after City Council president. We took that conversation citywide with her leadership and really built a groundswell support for this idea the people of Atlanta believed in it before anybody else. It was an idea that connected people together, both across the tracks by taking a barrier, this railroad that was a barrier between places, and making it a meeting ground, but also connecting over 45 neighborhoods around the loop in this loop formation that is as much metaphoric as it sort of is useful from a utilitarian standpoint. Yeah, so it started, we built a movement around it. We started putting together the agencies and organizations that are charged with making it possible. And we are. This is the border just a few years ago. You can see what's now Constantly Market back in the distance. At that time, this is 2009, it was 80% abandoned building and run by the city. Today, as you know, it probably looks more or less like this, even though this image is a few years old. And I always go back to this picture because that day was like this beautiful spring day. The leaves have just popped out. The sky is brilliant blue. My kids are up ahead of me on their bikes, and I'm in the back, taking pictures on my phone, trying not to have a wreck. And I get home and I'm flipping through those pictures, and I decided that this was my favorite picture that I've taken after working on this thing for about 15 years at a time. And not because it's a beautiful spring day, not because people are walking by literally talking about how in love they are with Atlanta. It's this woman on the right with the red hair. She's carrying her groceries. And in the process, she's validating everything we always said the Beltline would do, that is making a way of life possible that just wasn't possible before. And that's before the trail was even done. It's before all the running shoulders in place, before all the ramps and stairs are there, before all the trees, before the development, before the train, of course. And this is before Ponce City Market opens. If you know this area, you're right there off near Greenwood. There's a Whole Foods right there down off the cliff, but you can't get there, so there's no way down. And so imagine the development's already changing our lives for good, and certainly some challenges. But imagine how much more change is coming. It's exciting, of course, if we manage it, we make sure that the project lives up to its promise. But that's going to take all of us to participating and making sure that happens. But obviously pretty exciting. What's cool about, so fast forward to what I'm doing now, which is, I don't have time or won't bore you with all that. But one thing is I do get to travel quite a bit to share our story. Every city around the world, wants to hear this. They're doing similar things. When I go there to talk about the Beltline, whether I'm talking about interconnection or public health in the built environment, or transit, or green space, or housing, or gentrification, or equity, or green space, or parks, or whatever the subject matter is, there are always people doing something similar there. And I get to share our story, but also learn a lot about what's happening in other places. This is the most famous of these kind of linear infrastructure projects that are being repurposed, both for good and again, lots of challenges, especially around the economics of it for people and gentrification. This is the Highline in New York. I'm going to go through it quickly just to give you some examples. This is the rail park in Philadelphia. It's about 3 miles long. The first mile is in this beautiful tunnel. The last mile is above the city, like the Highline. Not just for railroads, this is the Green Line in Toronto. It's a power line easement. They're using the space below it for community gardens and parks and greenways and playgrounds and stuff like that. In Minneapolis, one of the early models for us with the Beltline was this project called the Midtown Greenway. It's also a railroad. This one's sunken below the streets, which are crossing above, you can see. The trail is built, and on the space on the left is a future transit line, just like the Beltline, but shorter. This is the same idea in Detroit, the Defender Cut trail on the right, future transit on the left. In Salt Lake City, they built it. It's a very short line, only 2 miles long, but that's basically what the Beltline will be. We'll have a little bit more space between the transit and trail. Unfortunately, we don't have the mountain range of the distance. This is in Singapore. They have a 15-mile abandoned railroad across their whole country island. And the cool thing about this project, in addition to it just being quite a beautiful area, is that they see the Atlanta Beltline as their primary model for what they want to do. Not for the physical transformation of the port, although that's part of it, but that they want to create a kind of infrastructure that supports the communities along the way and gives them the lifestyle that they want, which is pretty cool. Now Singapore, they're just going to build it. Unfortunately, we're a little slower than that. This is in New Orleans, so the Lafitte Greenway. This linear corridor was originally a portage route between the Bay St. John and the backside of the French Quarter. And then it was a canal for 150 years, and they filled it in and built a railroad, and they abandoned the railroad for generations. Now it's the Lafitte Greenway. In Miami, a 10-mile elevated transit line, the space below it being repurposed as a new greenway. In Houston, the drainage ditches that drain this very flat city, which have been degraded over time, streamlined and straightened by the Army Corps of Engineers, over time, degraded, now being repurposed, rejuvenated with life. My favorite of all these is the LA River. Who even knew LA had a river? Except every post-apocalyptic movie coming out of LA. I think it's beautiful, because I'm just not funny that way, but there are people who since the 80s trying to rebuild this thing as some kind of life-affirming infrastructure again, which gives you hope that of what's to come, because these projects are not just transforming the physical city, they're not just changing the way that we think about the city, what our expectations are for living there. They're literally changing the organizations and agencies that are charged with building the world, and I hope ultimately giving us the kind of city and the kind of lives that we want. The Army Corps of Engineers, which paved the LA River in the 1930s, paved 80% of a 51-mile long river with concrete. Just agreed 2 years ago for $1 billion restoration, one little piece of the river. So you can see how it's not just us changing and changing what we want, seeing something different in our lives. It's that our voice, what we want, is translating into the agencies and organizations, both on the public and private sector side, that build the world around us. They're going to give us what we want, and so we need to speak up and be very intentional about that. Not just big infrastructure projects. This is a great project in Indianapolis where they just took some extra traffic lanes that didn't have any cars in them, and they gave it back to people. Not brilliant, but beautiful, transformative for the city. So with all the experience, the story of the Beltline over the last now 15, 17 years, whatever it's been, and all these other projects happening around the world, I got this idea. I've been wanting to write this book. So my book came out about 1.5 years ago. And it's not too wonky. It's not like a city planning kind of book exactly. It's a narrative. It's a story. I didn't understand that when I started writing it, though, I was writing a story about my grandma. And this is the part that I really wanted to talk about today. Just talk about the interconnection between us and our lives and what kind of future we're shaping together. My grandparents lived in Alexandria, Louisiana. My grandfather was a banker, and when they got married in 1941, his boss convinced him to buy a house out on the edge of town. They rented rooms. It looked like Levittown or any suburban picture of America in the 1940s. They rented rooms to servicemen during World War II. They probably got one of those federal home loans that was only available to white people. And they participated in a story of American suburbanization that radically changed the world. Now, it wasn't their intention to change the world, but they participated in that cultural momentum. We were laying the foundation for urban sprawl at that time, of course, but we didn't call it sprawl. We called it the future, and it was. And you can't separate the physical construction of the world around us from the other things that were happening at that time. At that time, science was curing disease and lifting us to the moon. The sexual revolution was breaking down barriers. The civil rights movement had been on its march toward the fulfillment of our nation's promise. All of these things are happening at the same time that we're radically changing the way that we build cities. On the private sector side, of course, you've got the innovation of automobiles, but not just that. Air conditioning and food systems and entertainment, all was radically changing at that time. On the public sector side, though, you had engineers looking at new surfaces for driving on, the geometry of highways, and plowing these highways through urban areas and other places. And together, because of that cultural momentum that my grandparents were part of, the agencies and organizations and that we created started giving us the lives that we wanted. We collectively, sort of broadly. And again, obviously it wasn't for everybody, and that's important as we look ahead, but we were building that. Which gets me back to my story. So my parents moved us from Louisiana in 1974 to Atlanta, to Chamblee, to take advantage of the booming economy that was a direct result of all those highways. My dad grew up poor. Those highways put dinner on the table, sent me to college. He was an engineer. He designed pump stations and wastewater treatment plants to support the sprawling economy of the region. We bought a house that was incentivized by the construction of 285. Those highways did what city building infrastructure is supposed to do. It just wasn't for everybody, and it created a really crazy world that we live in today that has obviously lots of problems that we're struggling with now. Again, they could have never projected or thought, imagined what was coming, but they certainly participated in that evolution, in that story that created really beautiful places like this, where a lot of us really live a lot of our lives, and for reasons. And so when the Beltline comes into the story, it's important, it's interesting to think about it from a sort of cultural perspective. This is my daughter, right? That's her worldview, and as you know, probably, this is not some special event. This is any weekday, winter afternoon, and that's her worldview. That's her expectation for Atlanta. My morning commute, my sweet dog's last walk, these are parts of our lives. People are out there doing all kinds of crazy things. You've probably seen this. I don't usually, walk down the trail, playing my violin, taking my dog to the bicycle cooler. But she's out there all the time. I saw her the other day, and she's living the life that she wants. And she's making the rest of her life more interesting in the process. And so it gives you hope. People out there in every season, every time of day, not just getting exercise or going somewhere, but people going out on dates, people organizing their lives around it, and doing things that just wasn't really that possible before. This is a woman I met a couple years ago. She was excited about the Beltline because of the park. She liked the parks and trails and transit and all that, but she was really interested in the economy that it was going to bring to her neighborhood. She's a fashion designer, a new business owner, and she was excited that that the Beltline will do for her and her business and her family what all those highways did for my parents and my family. It'll give her business for her work, for her fashion. It'll send her kids to college. It'll put dinner on the table. It'll do all of that. So it's really exciting to see those kinds of stories happen. You all know the Lantern Parade, that this isn't just some thing that you watch, but that you participate in, and that what started as an idea for 200 people walking down the trail in the dark is now over 80,000 people. That couldn't have happened without that 2-mile slab of concrete, but it's not the concrete that matters, it's our lives and what we choose to do with it. And I think the Lantern Parade, more than anything, kind of illustrates what's possible with a different kind of infrastructure. So, last thing is sort of back to my story. I had to take my kids to the grocery store about a year ago, and they were complaining about it because they didn't want to get in the car. And they basically said, "Oh, Dad, if we have to go, can we ride our bikes?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course we can ride our bikes. That's what people in Atlanta do. We can ride our bikes." They don't know how ridiculous that is. But I do, and also know how powerful it is that that's their expectation for Atlanta. And for their lives, it is the kind of place that they can ride their bikes to the grocery store. And of course, from where we live, we can. It's the fastest way to get there, it's the healthiest way to get there, it's most sustainable and all that. So it gives you hope that as we start to, their perspective, that's an expectation. Just in the same way that malls and traffic was an expectation where I grew up out on 285. It gives you hope that with the big daunting challenges that we're facing as a city, as a region, as a country and a world, that we have a chance to sort of actually achieve, do better. So, thank you for having me hear my story.
If anyone has questions, like maybe 2 or 3, say what? Yeah.
I don't want to open a can of worms, but I'm sure you've heard this 2 weeks ago. There was an article in the Atlantic about the paper that was released by Nicolak and I think Balan. And I'm just going to quote the conclusion of the paper. It said, in the long run, without intervention, the Beltline will lead to economic and possible racial resegregation of the city. Do you know what initiatives, if any, are being done to kind of mitigate those effects? Because you can pretty much map the resegregation and gentrification of the city long run.
I can talk about it a little bit. Now, I'm not a housing policy guy, but I do know there are a lot of people who are working on this. I think it's important to say that I and Dan and I disagree on a lot. We agree generally on the principle of what needs to happen and that will happen if we don't do anything. There's no doubt about that. The question is whether it would be happening with or without the belt. If we weren't building the belt line, it would also be happening. And you know that because you go to LA, you go to Dallas, you go to Houston, you go to Charlotte, you go anywhere else, and it's also happening there, and they don't have any belt line. So I think the belt line sort of drives the geometry of it. It certainly amplifies and accelerates the sort of problem ahead. That movement that we started with was inclusive, and in fact, the reason why we even are talking, we have a need 15% of the tax allocation district goes to affordable housing is because there were housing advocates at the table who were insisting that it be put there. There are certainly people who didn't want it to be there, but we succeeded. And so I think the challenge ahead is multifold. The problem is that affordability and equitable outcomes are not easy. They're not. It's not one simple thing. It's not like we need to do one thing. We need to do like 40 things. What those 40 things add up to are, love. Do we love each other? And if we do love each other, then we need to do these 40 things. But instead, we get on these arguments about all the individual, like what we need to do. We need to support adequate supply. We need to protect our subsidies that we do have. We need to expand subsidies. This is going to cost money. We have to invest in it. We can do accessory dwelling units, get a lot of small units. There's a lot of regulatory things that the city can do very easily that would support affordability. We need to, they are going to be rewriting the zoning code. We need to do that. We need to increase wages. We need to create opportunity for people who don't have opportunity. But again, we need to do lots of kinds of things like that, and there are lists of these things. But mostly we need to care, and those of us who do care, we need to speak up and say something, and support all kinds of people in all kinds of places in their life, not just low-income people, although that's the most urgent, but also, there are also broad categories. There's people, homeowners or renters, there's people with children or not, young people, students, artists, seniors, all kinds of people in different kinds of periods of their life, and they all need kinds of help, and the way you approach those challenges are all different. So again, it's not like one or two things, it's like 40, but what they add up is to whether we can. You're right, that's a can of worms that I don't know. We can go on and on, but I'm happy to talk about that if that's what you want. I do think that this, and just to be direct, my biggest disappointment with where the city election is headed is that I thought that we were going to get, I thought that issue was going to be more front and center than it appears to be.
Maybe one more.
That doesn't mean that we shouldn't, that just means that we all have to double down and get help. They'll listen, but we have to speak up. Yeah.
So, for the belt line, would be an extension of MARTA that will run alongside the actual trails, all the pedestrians and bikes?
Yes, if you're on the trail now and you notice this sort of wide green swath next to you, that's where the transit line goes. It's not like the MARTA trains that we know today. It's more like the image in there. It's a streetcar. It's more like the streetcar downtown, except instead of running on the street, it's running in a greenway. It stops every half mile. It doesn't get up to very much speed.
Has it already been activated?
We haven't built anything yet, but we have paid for it. So last year, a year ago, maybe the only good news out of the election last year was that the citizens of Atlanta supported a transit referendum, a half-penny sales tax for 40 years that will generate $2.5 billion for transit in the city proper. That's a generational investment in transit, more than enough for the Beltline and lots of other kinds of things. How that gets executed is a political equation. Again, we're going to have to hold whoever our new leadership is accountable to that. All right, one more.
Yeah, are there
This last
plans?
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, are there plans to extend the belt line to any new parts of town?
Well, the Beltline's a loop, so you can't really
Okay,
extend it.
but-
But there are trails being built in every direction. So trail connections, and in fact, some of the connections will be built earlier than the Beltline itself. So Path 400 down to the South Fork Creek, Easter Creek out to Emory, the Proctor Creek one out northwest Atlanta to the river is being under construction now. There are ones down to the south as well, so lots of interconnection in that sense. And for transit, any future transit line that would also, it'll link to MART at each of the 4 compass points. But any future transit coming in or out of the city would also sit coming about. Good. Thanks again, Brad.
Thank you so very much for coming to speak with us. I think that's a super important topic. I mean, what Misha brought up is, of equal importance about how to do this responsibly and how to be thinking about that. I mean, I have a personal connection to this in that, I moved over a year ago, in August of 2016, and over this past summer, I started biking to work, and I go through Piedmont Park, and I use the Beltline to get lunch and do these things. And my connection to the people around me has fundamentally changed because I'm no longer behind glass and steel. And I see oh, this is the person that hangs out under this bridge, and this is where the King of Pop stand is, which is very important. There's actually 2. You have to get pull out of your way, but of course it's worth it. I'm joking, but these are real things that you just don't get to experience when you just head down 10th Street in your car and you just get angry at whatever is in your way. Often it's bikers as well. So. Yeah, I'm learning really hard that no one likes us, but that's okay. But yeah, and, you meet folks. I know the folks at my local bike shop now. I know them and I feel really well supported. That's something those are people I just would never know if I didn't try to do this thing and choose to live in town and just cut down on that half-hour commute that I can't do anymore. Okay, so now we're going to move on to something else that's kind of cool. We're going to go into our icebreaker. Here it comes. There it is. And Dan, who is right here, is going to give us the skinny on how this is all going to work. It's going to involve Lego. And let's welcome him on up.
Hello. I was going to say that, Dan, but
Yeah.
I didn't know how that worked.
I did have a slight panic attack. Oh my goodness.
Did they volunteer? So I have some water here because my throat's going to kill me, but I like all the Legos, so we're okay. Thank you.
Those are my Legos, so don't lose them.
They are. Yeah. I'm going to cough back in before I get back. Just kidding. All right, so we're talking about icebreakers here. We're talking about connection. And Brian hit on a bunch of great things. So when you talk about interconnection, you talk about building connection or interconnection, then one thing you might think about building is Legos, right? So we're going to do an exercise. This will be an experiment. See if this works or doesn't work on interconnection of people. We're going to get into some groups, and no need for tables. And then we're going to build some structures, and we're going to end up talking about the experience of that. So what you build is not as important as how you build it with the different people. So the rules are use all the Legos in your group's Lego bag. Build any structure you want. Each person needs to at least put on one Lego to the structure. And we'll have 2 minutes to complete all the structures. So it's probably been a while since you've done this. Not the Lego part. It doesn't mean, right? Saturday. We're going to count off to get into some groups. So roughly, I think we need to do counting up to 8. So that's our first test to try to pass on this. Yeah. So, 3 minutes ahead of time. Good job. Let's give them a hand. goal and you didn't know it. So I wrote down the goal because I figured I wouldn't remember it, so I just wrote it down. Here's the goal. Bring intentional mindfulness of all different sizes, shapes, colors, genders of humans with bits and pieces of life Legos, trying to make something out of it. Although we have different sizes, shapes, quantities, and colors of Legos, and our final structures may be different, we still connect with others. It's up to us to be mindful that we can shape our structures and connect with others in meaningful ways if we choose to. When you reflect on the life you have led in the future, how do you want your structure and connections to look? So, thinking of that exercise, connection, interconnectivity, communication, all of that went on to it. Looking at everybody around you right now, what are thoughts and comments? Did we achieve the goal? I'm just asking in general. Anybody want to comment on that? Yeah? Okay. I think so. Any thoughts, comments about this exercise? Success or failure?
Great success.
Yeah.
It's hard to follow directly at it.
And what makes it hard? Then that's a perfect segue I was hoping someone would bring up.
The structures themselves weren't strong foundationally, and then trying to connect them to all over. So they kind of have to be, have their own solid ground.
Excellent point.
We didn't necessarily have a plan or a vision for what we were making.
Yes.
We weren't necessarily knowing what other people were thinking. So I guess the thing would be to build a common future we have to actually communicate.
There you go. You have a whole bunch of different people thinking a whole bunch of different ways with a whole bunch of different perspectives, right? I mean, just being different heights gives you a different perspective on the world and the life you've led, you know? Let alone genders, colors, just everything, you know? How about time constraints? I mean, that also makes it tough, right? So when you throw a whole bunch of people into a room with a whole bunch of Legos with different sizes, shapes, and don't have a plan and kind of mix it up and try to make something out of it, and then come together with a couple people to put it all together, it's pretty amazing that you can make structures and you can, if the Legos work well, put it all together. And they don't have to have a specific plan, but it would make things a lot easier. So I hope the takeaway from this is really being mindful when you leave here, at least one more time in your life, think back to this exercise and think about how do you want your structures and your Legos to look. And if you imagine that, then just live that every day. It's that simple. And it'll all work out. So thanks for participating.
So while Dave cleans up the mess that y'all made, I just wanted to thank Dan for putting this together. Like he took this thing, he shepherded it from start to finish, and like usually you see him right behind his drum set, so it's really nice to see him out in front. It's kind of cool. Yes, absolutely. So up next, if you were more prepared, then you would know what's up next sooner. Up next is I'm Doing My Best, where just for a few minutes, a community member shares what's happening in their life with the rest of us. And this month's I'm Doing My Best does come with a content note. It's going to reference and be about suicide. And so Joanne, who's going to be speaking to us, she asked me to read something specifically. Joanne's story is not going to be graphic. That said, her experience with post-traumatic stress is that sometimes people need to unexpectedly leave the room to take care of their mental health for any number of reasons. She has done it herself. There is space outside the room where you can go. Folks are standing in the back who will just happily receive you and will let you sit with you if you'd like. They're not therapists, but they are caring community members, and that is what Sunday Assembly is all about. So, we could please give a warm hug of a welcome to Joanne.
Thank you. they resemble me, so I can say that. You might know you have post-traumatic stress if you wake up at 2 a.m. and you're thankful you've had a good night's sleep. You might think you have post-traumatic stress if your romantic relationship in the other state is not quite long distance enough. So those are some of the kinds of things that happen. My depression started when I was 9 years old with the announcement of my parents' impending divorce. And the main thing about that conversation that I remember is I was told not to tell anyone about it, not to talk about it. It hadn't happened yet. And I minded. I didn't talk to my mother about it. I do remember thinking later in that summer while I was playing jump rope, when will this sadness ever go away? So time progresses, my parents divorced, remarried, and at 15, I asked my mother if we could go to family therapy because I was miserable and I'd already had some suicidal thoughts. She said, no, our family doesn't handle things like that outside the family. We keep it inside ourselves. Time passed on, went to school, got a job in Chicago, and really started to go downhill there. I did finally reach out and get a therapist on my own. I paid for it out of pocket, so it would not show up on my insurance. There would be no record that I had. Time went on, I married, had children. The marriage started going south. I was suffering depression. Told my husband that I was going to a therapist, and he said he would drop me from his insurance if I did that, because he didn't want any record of mental illness in his family to be available to him. I went anyway, finally went to a psychiatrist, got some antidepressants. When he dismissed me because that was an uninteresting case, just a regular boring depressed married woman, I went to my GP to refill or actually try some different antidepressants. He said, without me saying anything about what my husband had said, I'm going to code this as anxiety so that depression won't be on the record. I went on, divorced, children got older, my daughter moved out. One night, my son woke me up in the middle of the night. He had just found out he'd been accepted to UGA, his dream school, and he was so excited and totally surprised. We went out to Waffle House at 2 a.m. to celebrate. Neither place else that was open at 2 a.m. That was wonderful. Time went on, and I started to feel a little better. And I decided to fulfill a vow that I had made when my brother Brian died from suicide when I was 30. It was right after I had come back from Chicago. I told him it was not worth his death, nothing was worth his death, but that I would try to do something positive. And now, over 20 years later, I'm starting to feel maybe I can do that. So I trained to be a peer support volunteer for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. Very good group. And before I could even ever go out on my first, assignment to be a support, towards the end of my son's sophomore year, my son Will died from suicide. I loved my brother. I loved him dearly. Will's death was so much worse. And then I had to watch my children go through the loss of a sibling as I had, and they're spiraled in. And the traumas just piled up on top of each other. My family imploded. Of 9 brothers and sisters, I had a speaking relationship, or really any kind of relationship, with one of them. During this time after my son died, I found Sunday Assembly. It's just, I cannot tell you how grateful I am for the support of Sunday Assembly. I started out better than I ended up. I kept getting worse and worse. At first I was able to lead hikes and participate in organizer meetings. I started to withdraw even from most Sunday assembly activities, even many assemblies. Being in groups was difficult. I did continue with meditation. Mindfulness meditation was also a huge support for me. And I can't tell y'all how grateful I am for my Sunday assembly community supporting me during that time, and also the support they gave my children. Finally, after running out of yet another support meeting, at this one I didn't knock over any chairs or, yell expletives at people as I went out of the room, but it was still kind of explosive. And this was about 4 years after my son's death. So, someone followed me out of the room. Turned out he was a psychologist, and he recommended I move into trauma therapy, specifically EMDR for PTSD. I wasn't really aware that PTSD, would apply to my situation. I thought veterans, like many people do. And now I know it's not uncommon response to survivors, much less to. I did start that therapy, and I started to gradually get better instead of being worse. I was getting a little better. At my first session, it's desensitization, it's kind of brutal. At my first session, I remember coming out of it and telling some of my friends here, I think my therapist is a sadist, and I'm a masochist for putting myself through. But I did start to notice some improvements, and so I kept it up, and it was good. Still, not all there, still a lot weighing on me, the constant knife into my heart every time I thought about my son, which was several times a day, had stopped, and that was a relief. But there was still lots of other stuff going on. I read an article, which was a kind of an advance in itself. For years, I couldn't read a whole magazine article, much less any books. All the book clubs I went to, I didn't really read those books. I read an article, and it talked about pairing a medication with the EMDR therapy, and they were getting some really good results. This was a very preliminary study. It's not been published really or anything. And I talked to my therapist. She was game to try it. After the first session, I did notice a positive change. By the end of the 6-session course of this, well before the end of it, my friends were telling me they noticed a difference. They noticed a difference in my face, in my voice. They started talking to me about things they would have been afraid to talk to me about, because they were afraid to set me off. And it has, if I believed in miracles, I would say this was like a miracle. This was only 3.5 months ago that I started the sessions. And the fact that I can stand in front of you today and talk to you is just wonderful. And so that's about that. My son and my brother died from undiagnosed, untreated mental illness. That was, part of that was from ignorance, secrecy, not talking about it, all those kinds of things. And not the least of it was I was part of all that, not talking. I did talk some, but clearly not enough. So I can say, standing here, in this moment, that I am doing my best right now. I'm not ashamed to tell y'all that I'm mentally ill. In fact, I have several mental illnesses. I'm not embarrassed to tell y'all about all the horrible, negative, terrible things that have gone on in my family. And I'm not afraid to talk about it. I'm not afraid to talk about depression, or PTSD, or suicide. My only criticism didn't talk more about it soon. And I want to thank my Sunday Assembly group for supporting me through all of this, for helping me, keep advocating for myself, keep trying to get help when it didn't seem like it was out there. And I want to thank all of y'all letting me share part of my story. Thank you very much.
So we're going to press on. The main thing I'm struck by is how in awe I am of Joan's strength in coming here, speaking about that experience, and trying to be a representative of mental illness. Just like, you know, I hope that I try to be a representative of the non-religious. You know, for example, I consider this community to be a representation of that as well. So thank you so much again, Joanne, for sharing that. On this next slide, I include just a really important phone number that I feel like you can never quite share enough. And I'm going to say it aloud. It is 1-800-273-8255, and that 8255 is TALK. And that is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And just the more folks that have that in their heads, just have access to that. It's a Google search away, of course, but I think that's really useful for, you know, the worst case scenarios. Just keep that in mind. And again, I'm really glad that SAA can create a space for members to share events in their lives like this, whether they're good or bad, big or small. And as it relates to that, our next section is going to be Life Happens, and Andy's going to come up here in just a second, where we're going to hear from all of y'all in smaller pieces. If you had written down on two little cards as we do each month. So I'll let Andy say more about that. So let's welcome Andy. One of these days I'll learn that you need that prop. One of these days.
It's all good. You may have seen the box. I think a lot of you are familiar with this already, but if this is new to you, at the welcome table, we have this box where folks can fill out a card to let us know what's happened in their lives, anything particularly good or bad over the last month or so. It's an opportunity for us to connect with folks that we might not have got a chance to do that in person here, because as we grow, it becomes harder to do that. So some folks have shared tonight, and you can do that anonymously too if it's something that you'd rather get out but don't want to put your name to it. That's legitimate. So the first card is from Giselle, who says, "Leaving tomorrow to move mom here from Michigan, a stressful 3-day trip, but will feel good to have family living locally after 20 years." Thanks, Giselle. This one is from Dan, who says, "I got to work at a library again starting tomorrow." This card is from Ross, who says, "My friend learned last month she has breast cancer at age 26. Signs are good for survival, but it's shaken us to our core, persevering." This card is from someone who chose to remain anonymous, who says, "Today I actually got outside the house for something other than work or the occasional errand. I look forward to reconnecting with my Sunday Assembly friends and family. I've missed you guys." From this heart. Another anonymous card, "Looking forward to a gift that's coming early next year." Smiley face. Mystery. This one is from Jillo, who gives us a PSA here. The circus that she's part of has opened a circus school in Grant Park. Check them out, the Circus School of Atlanta. This one is from me, and I say, "You may recall my having done an I'm Doing My Best a few months back about a plumbing leak which disrupted our lives for about 6 months. Well, we've got another one. Fortunately, it does not seem to be as bad as the last one, but I'm going to have to redouble my efforts to find the points of gratitude along the way, lest I get dragged into the disaster vortex. I suppose the opposite of this is sheer boredom, so I guess that's one point of gratitude." This one is from Brandon, who says, "Yay, I have plans for Thanksgiving." Another yay is Leslie, who says, "I'm ahead on my writing quota for NaNoWriMo." Is that?
Yeah.
I didn't even practice that. And I didn't write anything, I'm just reading. And have finished 3 of my smaller writing projects, and I'm pretty proud of the progress of my novel. This one is from Manav, who says, "I think cultures should borrow and share ideas together, not viewing that as cultural appropriation." Manav. This one is from Sonica, who says, "I'm looking into public mental health as part of my career because I'm curious about how to instill better mental health approaches into our culture. If anyone has some helpful thoughts or info around this field, come find me during the potluck." Thank you, Sonica. This card's from Laura, who says, "I just started doing urban sketching, so fun." This card is from someone who chose to remain anonymous, who says, "I'm starting a very new phase of my life. I feel like the possibilities are vast. I'm nervous and excited." And this last card, well, it's actually a little bit more than a card. This is something from Tom, and I'm honored that he's sharing this with us. "My wife, Catherine, died last week. She was only 63. I loved her, and I miss her very much. We were together for 21 years. She went into the hospital a month ago due to what turned out to be a cerebral hemorrhage. Emergency surgery in the middle of the night saved her from that. The next day, when I saw the scan showing she had 4 brain cancers, I did not know how long she would live, but I knew we would not be growing old together. She stayed in the hospital 3 more weeks recovering. Then there was another hemorrhage from one of the cancers. The doctor said they could do some stuff to keep her alive for a few more days, but it would hurt, and then in a few days I would be faced with the same decision. The hardest words I ever said were, 'Let her go.' My life changed suddenly. If there are people you love, I suggest you treat them very kindly and appreciate how wonderful they are. And do that right now, because someday the opportunity to do that will be gone. Thank you, Tom."
Thank you very much, Andy, and thank you for everyone who shared something. There's a nice and yeah, I mean, this assembly has just turned out to kind of have a lot of heavy stuff in it. I'm appreciative of the theme, which I think can go in a lot of different directions, because interconnection can apply to both the connections we have right now, but also cause us to reflect upon the ones we don't have anymore, or the ones that are threatened or anything like that. So I'm glad that we can have this space where we can be thinking about all the different highs and lows of what this theme means. So I'm going to invite the band up here. We're going to perform a song while we do the collection. Yeah, come on up. So each month, SAA incurs costs to keep creating spaces like this one that foster unity, wonder, and care. This list gets at most of the recurring stuff, but it doesn't include regular purchases like when things break or stuff, just to keep me able to hear me through all this. This moment right here is really crucial to our well-being, alongside online monthly donors. What you give here determines whether or not we lose money this month. And I'll be honest, I'm never super comfortable, asking for money. It doesn't feel great, but I'm steady by knowing that what we do and the spaces that we create, and what we have the potential to be doing, is worth swallowing that discomfort and making a case for y'all. So now's the time, literally, to get out your wallets. Andy is going to be coming around, or with other folks with baskets, a little later in the song. Please give what you can to make this community sustainable. So, thank you very much.
Yep. I just touched the volume, guys.
So run me, mama, like a wagon.
we have announcements, and then we'll be nearing the end here. Let's just run through these. So on the 1st of December, so we like to highlight all sorts of different small group events, right? Because that's a big part of what we do here. So on the 1st of September, we have a book club discussion, the book Sex at Dawn. The authors expose the ancient roots of human sexuality while pointing toward a more optimistic future illuminated by our innate capacities for love, cooperation, and generosity, which is a mouthful and sounds like a great book. December 3rd, the Sunday Gaming Gala. Meet us at the food court at Burlington Hall to share your favorite exotic board games and play a few you've never heard of. Just a casual thing, get together and play board games. It's awesome. 6th of December, Help Often, Mama Rose's Kids. This is something that Joan is spearheading this year, and I believe she did it 2 years ago. Mama Rose's Kids is a faith-based charity focused on at-risk children in South Atlanta. The group is now working to provide Christmas presents for 50 at-risk children, and they need our help. See Joanne, you all know her, or check Meetup for more info. There's a Meetup that kind of tells you how to like get in touch with her and pick a child to like provide a couple of items to make their holidays a little more grand. On December 17th is our next, maybe kind of sort of assembly. We will probably be doing something similar to what we did last year, which was a lot of holiday songs and connection and food and stuff like that. So look forward to that on the 17th of December. Speaking of holiday music, SAA is participating in a global Sunday Assembly sing-along. So after we close tonight, if you'd like to participate, we'll be listening through once and then singing along with the song "It's the Most Wonderful Time of the Year," which I'm sure all of you are vaguely familiar with. So we'll be recording it on video to share with, there's a UK assembly that's going to be, I guess, doing all the editing and all that kind of stuff. And they're going to put together with a bunch of other groups, like, just a nice, you guys know what I'm talking about, where they have all the different groups singing all these cool parts, and it's like, hey, look, we're this global community of, dare I say, interconnected.
We are the world.
Say what?
We are the world.
Let's see. And if you won't be participating, all that I do ask is that when we're going to listen to it once so everybody knows how it goes, and then sing along to it. And I just ask that for quiet during those like 2.5 minutes, which I will probably talk to into a mic and tell you to be quiet. So now let's bring up Anna for a short reading. You have a short quote, and let's do it.
This is a quote from Albert Einstein. A human being is part of a whole, called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. We experience ourselves, our thoughts and feelings, as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of our consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison, restricting us to our personal desires and to the affection for a few persons nearest us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty.
We got one more song.
Which I'm going to unsurprisingly request that everyone sing along to as well. Yeah, there's the band up here. So you guys probably know this from a Coke commercial, but there are other words for it, and it's less fun. I believe, Anna, you're going to give people a little tutorial about it. And once they get the idea, then we're all going to stand and we're going to sing along to it, and you definitely know.
Okay. We're going to be singing 3 verses, and in a minute I'm going to sing the melody. But then after those 3 verses, you're going to sing la 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 with that melody. And then at the very end of the song, you're going to sing la la la. So how it goes is, what you'll be singing is la 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 la. Does that sound familiar? Yeah. Okay, get your Bell bottoms and let's sing this.
Please stand. Let's do it. Take away whatever.
I'd like to build a world at home, furnish it with love, grow apple trees and honey bees and snow white turtle doves. I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony. I'd like to hold it in my arms and keep it company. I'd like to see the world for once, standing hand in hand, and hear them echo through the hills for peace throughout the land. La 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 I'd like to build the world a home, furnish it with love, grow apple trees and honey bees and snow white turtle doves. I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony. I'd like to hold it in my arms and keep it company. I'd like to see the world for once, standing hand in hand, and hear them echo through the hills for peace throughout the land. La 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 la
Singing together can be fun. So now is the time where you can make a very important choice of food or singing along and being part of the local community. Either one's fine. But thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for being a part of this community. And yeah, if you want to be part of the singing, come on up. Otherwise, enjoy your food.
It's still here.
Yeah, you're also allowed to